Hola, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to our Flourish Focus. This is a series where we feature one-to-one exchanges with fintech innovators around the world. My name is Diana Narvaez, and I look after Latin American investments at Flourish Ventures. Today, only 1 out of 3 small businesses manage to survive after 5 years of operations. The main reasons are poor management practices and lack of financing. 34% of small businesses that closed during the pandemic stated that access to credit could have stopped their business from closing. Joining me to talk about this sobering statistic are Suzy Ferreira and Andrea Burattini, 2 inspiring fintech entrepreneurs I deeply admire and co-founders of one of our Latin American portfolio companies, Dinie, a startup that is working specifically to address this problem. Dinie is an embedded lending infrastructure provider. It helps digital platforms such as e-commerce and marketplaces provide embedded financial products to the underserved SMBs in Brazil. At Flourish, our mission is to identify tech innovations and to support passionate founders like Suzy and Andrea, who advance financial health and economic resilience for people and businesses around the world. Suzy and Andrea, thank you so much for accepting this invitation. As I reflect on today's theme and why the 3 of us are so passionate about small businesses, I realize the 3 of us have something in common. We each grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. We got to see the hustle and we got to experience firsthand those difficulties of starting and growing businesses. So, Suzy, let's kick it off with you. Small businesses are the backbone of the economy. I've heard your story, your personal and your family story before, and I would love for you to share more about it because it really served to fuel and ignite what Dinie is today. So tell us more.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation, Diana. So yes, I mean, it all comes down to when I was very little, right? And watching my father as a small business entrepreneur in the countryside in Brazil. I've watched him building businesses from the ground up, perhaps like 10 or 15 different businesses. He was a real hustler. He comes from a very underprivileged background in Brazil. He didn't have access to education, formal education. You know, he was always kind of like in the streets, to be honest, and then growing up and, you know, like making a living for himself. Very much a hustler and someone that I really admire and look up to. But I always watched him, you know, throughout his life, even though he was always very ambitious and visionary, and he always wanted to change the world for the better. So I think he had the whole universe behind him, right? He didn't have the means, but he had this vision and this drive. And every time he would start like a small business, it would do extremely well. And at some point, due to both like this lack of financial education and education as a whole, but also the fact that at some point of the business, they would always need to like find extra capital because they're getting some traction, right? And they need to be able to grow, so they need capital. So what these small businesses such as my father do to go after a bank, right? And then the products that you encounter are overdrafts, credit cards, or invoice discounting, and so on. These are products that are quite outdated and they weren't really built with like this growth or this more sustainability in mind. They're more like emergency capital as opposed to growth capital. So unfortunately, the small businesses in Brazil don't have access to this. My father also had the same problem, and they would always get like over indebted with this sort of inadequate products, right? So at some point, when I was 8, 9 years old, I remember telling you guys a story a couple of years ago during a pitch to Flourish. We went bankrupt and we lost everything. We lost our house. We lost everything inside of the house. It was quite traumatic for an 8, 9-year-old, right? To see our family losing everything. And somehow I believe that it was this sort of life story and this trauma that was then positively transformed into a mission, right? So it was by watching him struggle. And then after that, to be honest, my mom rebuilt the whole family again by using credits. This time, my mom is a little bit better with money, and we're able to rebuild. We're able to use credits so I could go to school, and then I could go to university. Eventually, I even went to like do a master's degree at UCL in London, funded by credit and also scholarship. But the moral of the story is, saw him struggling, but credit also at some point were very positive to drive prosperity into my own life. So I knew that it's possible to use credit for good and to drive prosperity as opposed to bankruptcy, as long as credit is used, is delivered in an adequate way, it's priced in an adequate way. And that's what we're here to do, right? How can we transform credit into a force for good to help small businesses like my father to continue to be the driving engine of the economy and to flourish? So yeah, that's why we exist.
I like that segue into Flourish's businesses. Very nice. This is such an inspiring story. And maybe Andrea, you can tell us more. We talked about these SMBs that are underserved. We talk about these individuals that are starting companies that, yes, don't have the knowledge, don't have the access, that is struggle. They historically have been excluded from traditional banking providers for various reasons. So in your own words, tell us about Dinie. How is Dinie changing this story about product? Tell us about the features, the value proposition.
Perfect, Gianna. Well, I think this is a business very close to all of our hearts here. And you're absolutely correct, right? Small businesses, they struggle. They have to live and prosper and survive with limited, scarce resources. So up until today, the present days, it is very painful for small businesses to access credit. When they go to a traditional bank, the process is very time consuming. It takes weeks for them to get a response. They need to submit lots of documents and paperwork that they don't even have or use on their daily businesses. And the whole process already starts with a lot of anxiety because they fear being part of the vast majority of micro and small businesses who get a no when trying to apply for a credit from a traditional bank. So what we observe is that today the journey from accessing capital and financial services is completely disconnected from business reality and business day-to-day. So when we created Dinie, we were observing how is this new scenario? What is the new reality of small businesses? And what we see is that they are adopting technology in an increasing pace to solve real operational problems. Because of these problems we mentioned, like lack of resources, lack of team, and so on, there are specialized platforms, digital platforms, that are proposing to solve these huge pains for them. So they help them sell better, purchase inventory better, deliver their products. And the SMBs are becoming every day more dependent on these digital ecosystems, these digital platforms. And in this process, millions of SMBs trade every day in this digital environment, leaving a lot of digital footprint and fingerprint on all their transactions, tradings, and so on. So what we see is that Dinie is best positioned to leverage all the data being generated in these ecosystems, and also this close relationship with the business day-to-day journey. So when Dinie integrates to a digital platform, a non-financial platform like a delivery platform and e-commerce and so on, we leverage this massive amount of real-time alternative data from millions of SMBs to create credit scoring models that enable us to say yes when all the other players say no to these businesses. Also, we distribute and we connect the access to capital to a day-to-day transaction inside the platform the SMB trust and they depend on. So while this SMB is finishing their checkout because they are purchasing inventory, the capital button is there present for them to make the payment. When the SMB is preparing for a promotion in the weekend where they will deliver at at lower rates, that's when they will need the working capital facility to prepare in advance. So that way we reduce this gap and we connect the day-to-day business goals, and we put the financial services as an enabler and not the other way around.
Fascinating. You're innovating from different fronts. So Suzy, those product features, that value has a lot of impact. Share with us about what is the impact of Dinie. Talk to us about vision, about how we best serve this segment of the population that with banking products that are tailored to their needs, that are products that are ready, like Andrea just said, the capital button right there in the app that they know, that they're familiar with, and that they trust.
Exactly. Actually, this all comes from the place of vision. And that's when Andrea and I connected in the first place. We have like similar friendship groups, but we didn't know each other before. And I remember coming up to Andrea to talk about this, right? And I thought, well, maybe this is like a little crazy, but that actually made completely sense with Andrea as like the first follower, right? And then a lot of new people like understanding where we want to get to. So the idea here is I approached Andrea and said, my dream is to make like capital accessible as like water and electricity in one tap, right? And the idea here is then, why I'm coming up with, because we believe that capital, financial services in general, for a small business should be part of the tools, right? The tools that they have, not like the objective that you want to get to, like you have to get out of your business and go to a bank and wait in a queue and bring paperwork. Like that becomes like a huge part of your day. No, it should just be like your computer, or it should just be like the electricity that you use or the water. So it's an infrastructure play. That's how we came up with this first concept in our product of this digital credit account. So it's basically the money is in your mobile. It's an extension of the pocket of the SMB, and it's accessible in one click. So this is the idea. How can we then transform this into an infrastructure? That was the second part of the evolution, right? So it's in one tab, your digital credit account. So how can we deliver that as infrastructure? By plugging this in where that SMB is operating, right? So in that operating system, the marketplace or the e-commerce site, potentially payment companies, ERPs, accounting software, anyhow, places where they're connected, where they're running the business, where data is flowing, capital is flowing, and I plug this in and I become part of the infrastructure of the SMB. In terms of impact, we're talking about, as Andrea mentioned, access they don't otherwise have. If you think of our customers, more than 60% of them do not have access to traditional bank finance. That's huge. In a country like Brazil, that now most of businesses they have access to current accounts, but still capital, it's nowhere to be seen. And in terms of access, so we're able to bring companies that wouldn't be otherwise accessible, but also we can make it part of, as we said, the infrastructure, so it's easy to access, easy of use. They don't have to go through the bad experience of applying for credit. We actually do the whole work underneath the hood. We're doing all the work, and we proactively show them, look, this is how much you've been selling. You're doing extremely well. Like we can see that your sales are sustainable or growing. And by the way, we would like to see more growth. Here's a capital, like a working capital facility, which is tailored to that amount of money that you are making in this platform. And by the way, this is the pricing as well, much more accessible pricing, because we can use all of that data. And also we can use the payment flows that are happening inside the platform. We can collect the repayment credit directly from their sales. So access, ease of use, and also accessibility from a pricing perspective, right? This is massive impact. Right now, we can't still change the world because, if you look at us, I would say personally, it's still expensive, but comparing to an overdraft and a credit card, it's like a massive saving, way more than 100% saving actually for the SMB. And then, but going forward, again, from a vision perspective, we want to tap in the capital in mature markets where capital is cheaper and bring that capital to emerging markets. And that's when we're also going to be able to substantially cut the cost that we have on the capital so we can reduce the cost for the SMB. So these are other ways. And also we think about many other ways as well around potentially the platform also participating in the risk. So the thinking here is, how can I make it extremely accessible and as cheaper as possible for SMBs? So this becomes actually a commodity for them, like water, electricity, one tap, and a simple payment fee on a monthly basis.
Mm-hmm. Love that vision. I think the idea of mobilizing capital to other geographies where is needed and access to it is very expensive, as well as the idea of these invisible bank or invisible financial services, right, that you're mentioning. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to go to a branch. The customer journey is just, it made so smooth that I don't even realize that I'm accessing these products. And the way to engage with customers in financial services is just so smooth that that again, they feel they already trust the platforms, they already believe in them, they're already giving them a good service. And so one additional button to release that capital is even going to help with that engagement. So we have talked about how hard it is to be a small business owner, right? And maybe if we just pause for 1 second, and we talk about what we're seeing here now, like right now in this discussion, right? 3 women talking about how to build the future of fintech. 2 female founders right here in front of me in Latin America that are defying the odds in a sector that is traditionally male dominated. So Suzy and Andrea, I'd love to hear more about your journey, your personal journey as a founder, as a leader, and the learnings that you would have liked to know when you started this venture. So any of you kick us off.
Cool. Do you want to start, Andrea? I was just finishing.
Yes, I can start. Well, I think first of all, when I started this whole journey, I would never think it was possible to arrive at this point we are today here in Dinie, where a small startup, early stage startup, managed to acquire partnerships with the largest e-commerces in Brazil, all unicorns, and that we would be providing something that really changed the game for them and for their customer base. So I would never imagine that was a possibility. So I would say dare to dream big. Amazing things can happen when you're doing something you are passionate about and you know that you can solve better than any other person. Also, I would say that another important learning is to leverage your network, especially in the early days, right? Everybody loves the cute startup that is being born. Everybody wants to help. And sometimes even second, third degree connections can convert into big opportunities. And yeah, I would say also very importantly is to keep laser focused, right? There is scarce resources in the beginning, and if you can keep your head down, focus on your purpose, on your vision, is going to be great deal for achieving success early on. And form your team as well, right? The first hires here at Dinie, we chose very wisely, took a while including to find the people, but this first layer of warriors are going to be with you on the bad times, on the good times. They need to be better at you, and they will be the propagators of your culture, of your vision. So I think that are the main learnings here at Dinie.
Cool.
Wow. Diamonds right there.
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks. I'm happy that Andrea spoke first because I was going to bring some of the challenges here. And this is the thing about Andrea and I. She's always like super positive. So, if you ever need some help, Andrea is there because, she's super positive and energetic. I love it. I can bring a little bit of the like struggles, right, that we have faced and I have faced personally in financial services. I've only ever worked in financial services. I was for almost 6.5 years in banking. And then sometime I was part of a co-founding team that was building a banking as a service in the UK, also just men, and then working in payments. So the whole experience up to Dinie was a complete male-driven industry, right? And it's a man's world that we're trying to change, right? And what I went through a lot of hurdles, a lot of really traumatizing experience by working only with men. Like I was almost like the 1 in 10 usually in the companies. And when I came up with Dinie, 2 things were very important, right? Like in the first beginning, I wanted the co-founder that was a woman. And obviously here you are, Andrea. And the idea was we want to, as 2 women, to build a product that speaks both the language of women, but also obviously the men, right? Because the majority of financial products are built by men for men and women, but doesn't necessarily speak the language of women. So for me, that was very important to have like really diversify, really build a product that is inclusive. And I thought the only way to do that is by being designed by 2 women. So that was a massive mission. And the second is that we can bring a lot of women into this journey, right? Because again, we want to include more women. We want to be role model for more women. And how many women are there trying to rebuild and, like think a bank from scratch, being 2 ladies. So for us, in one side, change and be able to include more women and more companies, but in the second, also include more women working with us. But just thinking about this link to, one, always working with men and feeling quite undermined, to be honest, and now being able to lead our people, to build a culture where women are not undermined is very important, but we still struggle with the rest of the industry, particularly venture capital is a massive struggle for us. It's a challenge. And reason being here, there's like these unconscious biases, that where the capital is going is mostly to a certain type of people that have a certain type of background, usually more like privileged sort of backgrounds, dropouts from certain top universities, or, part of certain club, or like that did more like engineering or maths degrees and so on. There are tons of reasons why we end up seeing that the majority of these companies are founded by men. And the majority of them receive venture capital when women have very little. In LATAM, the data is really sad. Women-only founders only 4% of them received venture capital, and only 0.2% of venture capital. So this is something that has been a struggle, and hopefully we can be a driving force to show a business that, it is already different by design because it's 2 women and can evolve and can make a difference, so that there will be a lot more venture capital out there. So if you ask me what I would have done different, I was just thinking maybe, have dropped out, like collecting those brands and those labels that investors expect you to have. But I don't think that would have been possible. So that's difficult.
Thank you for going into this path of the most difficult path, right? We're trying to prove something different, things that people are not used to seeing. And so I'm glad the 3 of us here are having that conversation. And I guarantee, I'm so sure that this is inspiring future women entrepreneurs or underserved, underestimated founders, not necessarily women, but from the outskirts of the city and places where they're not seeing these examples. So I am very excited for this to serve as that inspiration. the idea of building a diverse and an inclusive culture within your company and translating that or expecting that to be translated into building a product as well that serves a diverse segment, it's very interesting. So we're running out of time. This is such an engaging conversation. Why don't we end this with a set of rapid fire questions? So here's the deal. I'll throw a question out there. Maybe we will start with Suzy. And then you will think of the first one or two words that come to mind and just share them with us. So it will be pretty quick and spontaneous. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. What is a startup entrepreneur that you admire? Suzy.
Stripe founders.
Andrea.
Chris Junqueira from the bank.
Very nice. Andrea, let's start with you this time. Something that we don't know about you that often surprises people.
Well, I'm a great singer and guitar player.
Oh, we gotta hear you next time. Very nice. Suzy?
Yeah, I have a very political nature, like in politics, I'm quite passionate about politics. That's the other side of me.
Suzy, one book, author, podcast that you highly recommend.
Huberman Labs. Andrew Huberman.
That is a podcast.
Podcast, yes. And a book? Did you ask for a book?
That's fine. Andrea?
021 Peter Thiel.
Wonderful book. Yeah. All right. Again, this is the last question. In a couple of words, feel free to take a bit more time for this one. Andrea, what would you like to be remembered? Or how would you like to be remembered?
Well, I guess I would like to be remembered as the bold lady who dared to challenge financial services, who was a pioneer in creating this movement where we are creating equal opportunity for everyone, even the weaker links in the chain. From Brazil to the world.
Wow. Powerful women here. Suzy.
My case, a driving force towards prosperity for human beings. So in a very broad sense, I'd like to be remembered for that, being a force for good, driving prosperity for humans.
It fills me up with so much satisfaction and energy to learn that we're all here contributing to the growth of small businesses in Latin America and the good force change for the world. So we had such a great discussion today. Time flew by. We talked about, one, the problems that SMBs face, two, how Dinie integrates with digital platforms to embed these lending products. And last but not least, we heard about the journey of two extraordinary female founders, leaders, building a mission-driven company. So thank you so much. Thank you for the exchange of ideas, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you so much.
Very
it was
much.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. For questions regarding today's discussion, Flourish Ventures, or any of our portfolio companies, please email us at events@flourishventures.com. Till next time.